I can see him as if he was here about to walk through the door for the very first time, or maybe for the 50th time. I know you all understand that old friend of yours who you haven't seen in a while, but you could pick up the conversation with them as if they had visited you last night. When he walked through the doors of the library, he was simply unmistakable. He was the image either of an Eldridge Cleaver or a Che Guevara. Who wears a red beret in public? He was wearing a red beret, a 3/4 length military jacket with combat boots. He was about 6'2", and his chin was up. The bones of his jaw, the hollows of his cheek, and the flesh above his lips were the shadow of maybe 3 or 4 days' growth. His complexion, coffee with a significant amount of milk. He had been referred to the library as part of the literacy program because he couldn't read his employer's performance review, nor could he respond to the review in complete sentences, so the employers had referred him into the program. I would be his tutor for 3 years, and during that period, come to know him. We started with the performance review, and I read the performance review to him and finally got him to understand, after I had him trying to read it as well, that it was a really good review, that they liked his work ethic, that they felt he had a future with Sonoma Mission Inn. I had him write down as best he could what he thought, but it usually didn't match what he had just said out loud. So I would rewrite it for him, okay? Then he would take what I had tried to rewrite to the best of my knowledge with grammatical correctness and have him put that in the form. And this was the procedure we would follow every time he needed to write something. First the discussion, then a rough draft, then my corrections, and then the final draft. We worked at the library for a while, and we were reading all the pretty much sanitized 2-minute biographies that the literacy group had given us. Short works by, that were on Chavez or Martin Luther King or some of the other cultural heroes of our time. That didn't seem to be relevant to him, didn't seem to be motivated by it. So we tried to get on the computers at the library, but it was impossible to get on when we were there because we met late in the afternoon. I began to have the meetings at my house. So the first few meetings consisted of the following. We went online and got parts for his Buick 88. It was a classic. We'd go online and we'd look up how to start up a marijuana plantation. Okay? We went online to find out how did we get the felony removed from his record that he had gotten when he was a youth because he got busted selling some dope. We looked up schizophrenia and the medication that he was taking for it, symptoms of schizophrenia, and the contraindications of the medicine. He was a man who had a whole lot of charisma, but really was going to be at war with the details of his life and of communication. So we had moved the meetings to my house, and we got to share. We met every Wednesday or every other Wednesday, depending on his schedule. 7:30, 8 o'clock, I left the window open for him because he had to work all day long, and then he loyally stopped off to visit his girlfriend for a short time and then would come over to the house. We'd meet for maybe an hour, we'd work for maybe an hour or an hour and 15 minutes, and then we'd talk. We'd talk about stuff guys talk about. You know what that is, right? Work, women, and imagining how you're going to acquire more wealth. Those were the 3 of the things we talked about. He also related the experiences of his past, which included some discrimination against him, both during his life and at work. I introduced to him kind of a novel idea that all the experiences that you have in life help build up for you a permanent soul that can withstand almost any shock, even the shock of death. He talked about being raised by a single mom and his grandfather, and he talked about the fear yet admiration that he had for his absentee father. I shared part of that experience with him. Some of the things that we do that we did, I always wanted them to be relevant, so I tried to start simple. It was coming upon Mother's Day, so I bought him a Mother's Day card. And I said, okay, we're going to have to start doing some conventional things, like sending out cards. So I got the card for him, and he started to sign it, and I said, oh, no, it's not that simple. And so I made him read the pleasantry inside, which was difficult for him. Then I made him write something. He didn't want to because something was already written, but I said, well, that's not how the lesson goes. So he would write a rough draft, then I would make the correction, and then he would put it into the card. Well, he grew to find that relevant. And so we ended up doing, for all his relatives, cards for Thanksgiving, for Christmas, for Valentine's Day, whatever occasion would come up. And that seemed to work. He had a reunion in Texas with his mother and the grandfather, and actually a sister and a brother, because he had started to communicate with them. Now, you'd think, I wanted him to do this because of the joy you get in communicating to somebody. But for him, it came with a certain price. When he held a pen in his hand, it was like some kind of foreign instrument that he really didn't know what to do with. Now, when we hold a pen, we just start writing. It just kind of flows out of us like water. But for Dominic, the words came in a manner that was both aching and spasmodic. It was really difficult for him to do that. Some of the things we did were we wrote his daughter, who he hadn't seen in 10 years, to try and reestablish a relationship with him. He would bring up his bills for us to go over together, because that's relevant about somebody's life. And so we would go over the bills. One night he brought up a letter from an attorney. He had a 5-year-old son out there that he owed back payments on. And so we were trying to write a letter to try to get some sort of adjustment so he could make the current payment and pay part of the back payments as well. Well, the upshot was that the letter simply did not work. And he knew that he had to up his game. And to what Dominic that meant was he was probably going to have to deal drugs to make up the payments. We did some other things that all were related to his family. And we met a number of times. The 25th time, to reward him for his consistent effort in doing this was over about a year's period of time, I took him out to a restaurant, but I didn't make it easy for him. You know, we were going to have dinner and ale, and so I made him read the menu, then I made him read the labels on the beer bottles. You know how difficult that is? There's a whole lot of words on the beer bottles. And then the ribbon across underneath the television screen. So I made him work for it. After we had worked together for about 2.5 years, he brought over a citation for a DUI. He had come to a stop sign, and he had hesitated when he saw the police car across the street. And for that, he got pulled over. He was barely above the legal limit. He hadn't sped, hadn't been driving erratically. And he brought over the form that we had to fill out for his attorney. And you can imagine how difficult it was for him. He had to figure out the legalese. We worked on it together. He then had to write a statement that was contrary to the policeman's statement. It was literally flying in the face of authority's reality, but that's what he had to do. I never met a man who worked harder at trying to adjust what he had done in the past to try to make up for the past. It was almost as if he were trying to balance scales and could not find that point of rebalancing things. So we had met 66 times, and he didn't show up one Wednesday, didn't show up the following Wednesday, nor did he show up the third Wednesday, which was very unusual. About 9 o'clock, there's a knock on the door. It's his girlfriend. And my mind literally seemed to divide at that time. The wish was she was going to ask me, have you seen Dominic? Nobody's seen him around for a while. You might know. But no, that wasn't it. She said he was dead. The police said a self-inflicted gunshot wound in the stomach. Well, who shoots themselves in the stomach? Maybe it was a drug deal gone wrong. Maybe he was cleaning his weapon and it accidentally discharged. But he was too strong. He was too strong for the voices that he heard that were always trying to dissuade him from trying to get to refine that balance. And I felt that he was so resilient that no matter what went against him, he had enough momentum. But maybe the how of death really doesn't matter. maybe all that really matters is what you believe death to be. I met his mother at the memorial service. She believes he died and went to heaven and is at rest. But I look up and I still see him coming through the door. You know what I mean. Like an old friend who you've seen before, but just haven't seen in a while.